And at the beginning, just a very short video about our vision to make a background.
Forget the war.
Think about how it could be. A new mindset has arrived, where to share has become our greatest power.
It is this energy that guides us, will enlighten us. Where meaning and purpose is a flame.
Burn inside every soul on the planet.
Welcome to the human-to-human model, uniting and inspiring leaders globally.
To build together with meaningfulness and joy.
Opening new possibilities for people.
Anticipating disruption. Rethinking society.
Who will reach their potential because the future is today.
Join us
To be sustainable plus 112.
Right now, it's the Earth's core later.
I find that when people begin making changes, they gradually get bigger because they get this feeling, I am doing something.
So we moved from greed-based civilization to human value-based civilization. Making money is a happiness. Making other people happy is a super happiness.
Wondering about your future? So bring your DNA to us today.
So this was actually our vision, and after all the discussions with our leaders, we believe that by 2030, the whole world's paradigm will change, and it will be driven through multi-trillion investments, and also by the disruptive technologies, and through people like you who are creating disruptive startup companies.
Solar Business Club leaders gathered in Dubai with the leaders of financial and investor communities, but also political decision makers to explore opportunities related to exponential growth of solar, battery storage, electric vehicles, hydrogen, smart energy, and other clean technologies.
Right now, you need to party. Make yourself rise up and walk away from things that's keeping you down. Yeah, you need to party till the sun rises up. Another day for you to change things around. Every day of sunshine.
During the next months, we will unite over 1,200 leaders on all continents to reinforce human-to-human relationship and work hand in hand on financial instruments and business models to scale up clean tech investments from billions to trillions while shaping the future today.
Every day of sunshine, sunshine, sunshine. Every day of every day of every day of
And we will make it by combining business with meaningfulness and joy. Thumbs up for solar.
You deserve attention when you walk into the room.
And also, I think that what we could especially notice in this disruptive moment of COVID around the world, that it's so important to work together. And we should not only work together between the CleanTech leaders, but we believe that it's so important to work together with financial leaders, startup leaders. That's why we had the session before. And it's so important to unite us and bring the experience of people who were in startups since ages and who are helping the companies to grow since a couple of years, and they have special programs to help them also right now, yes? And within the CleanTech Startup Hub initiative, we would like to combine and unite forces of investors, of industry, of experts, and of course of startups, yes, to bring them from the invention to the market. So, as you can see, we decided to make the Startup Hub in France. And now I would like to give a floor to you. The floor is all yours. And I would like to first give big thanks to Charlie for helping us to set up this amazing panel. And Debbie brought Jill for accepting to become chair. And Cornelius, who is also a very close friend of mine, to moderate this discussion. And it's really touching moment because we organized this in just a couple of days. And we were able to bring such an amazing group of people. And in the meantime, I will switch off the slide because there are some other speakers coming to the room. So Cornelius, Debbie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. So Debbie, why don't you start as a chair and introduce a little bit, and then I can maybe introduce myself and get the discussion started.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you for having me. Hopefully you can hear me all right. My name is Debbie Brote-Giles, and I'm with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I am a data person by nature and trade, but then I'm also right now working very closely with startups in something called the American Made Challenges. So we started this program with the Department of Energy to really accelerate solar innovation and manufacturing ideas about 2 years ago, actually. So we are in our second and third rounds of the Solar Prize right now. So we have launched the Solar Prize, which is a $3 million prize competition for folks that are interested in really accelerating solar innovation. And then that's been so exciting that we've expanded it to other domains at the Department of Energy as well. So we have water prizes and a geothermal prize coming out really soon. We have a battery prize, hopefully buildings prizes coming soon. So there's a lot of excitement around prizes right now and trying to innovate entrepreneurs in the federal government.
That's great. Well, thank you. And we'd love to hear a little bit more. That was indeed one of the things. I had an interesting call with Charlie yesterday, and he mentioned about this American award with the different technologies. I think this is very, very exciting. So let me maybe just briefly introduce myself, and indeed following the discussions we had with Thomas, with Eike, with Anis in January, we really said we want to do something for startups as well. There's a big need. You know, we have so many great entrepreneurs. We need good inventors, good tech more than ever now, particularly for clean technologies, things like hydrogen. You know, they offer completely new opportunities, which is really exciting. We have obviously the network, we have access to investors, we have access to market even. So we believe we can really help in this context and make an impact. To just briefly introduce myself, my name is Cornelius. I'm based out of Dubai since 2013. I've been in banking for 10 years and over the last 10 years in renewable and CleanTech, co-founded a few companies myself like Paygo Solar in Africa, but mainly active as an angel investor, also one of the investors in the Dubai Angel Investor Fund, which we have witnessed actually quite an exciting development over the last few years. So I'd love to maybe just talk briefly later about Dubai Angel Investors. And the startup scene has really finally developed a bit in Dubai, which is exciting. I've invested in solar diesel hybrid, fuel saver, solar battery. We're building step by step a solar rooftop platform for Africa in countries like Ghana, Mozambique, together with Eike, very interesting company, and in energy efficiency. So that's a little bit the field. So CleanTech is my passion, is driving me every day, and that's where I love to be. I'm also coordinating a think tank called DII, Desert Energy, where we are doing quite a bit of work recently, particularly on hydrogen, but also on storage with battery storage and a few other things. Now, I think I'll not talk more. We have an amazing panel here, as Thomas said, in a very short time. I'm so excited. about the 4th day, and tomorrow is the 5th and the last day of this global eConvention, all organized in an extremely short time. And I think this is really a bit of writing history. This is streamed on YouTube. This is recordable. We have amazing networking. I'm really impressed by the level of people as well, which is confirmed again in today's panel. So I would maybe like to introduce you one by one, and we can have maybe a first introductory round, maybe 5-6 minutes or something. And then given the amount of speakers we have, I suggest you have a relatively just a brief overview on your activities, and then we can get maybe a bit of a discussion started as well. So, well, Debbie, I suggest we start with you. You have a prominent role also with this initiative where you're connecting also for the Department of Energy, the startups, you know, with on different technologies, on all channels. Why don't you outline a little bit more what exactly are you doing and how you help the startup ecosystem in the US?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So yeah, so going back to the American-made challenges that I briefly talked about earlier, we have about 10 different prize challenges going on right now in solar and wind and geothermal and batteries. And it's just really amazing. These startups and entrepreneurs are coming to the table with fresh ideas, and we're connecting those entrepreneurs to a network of innovators and accelerators and incubators and prototyping facilities across the country. So we have around 130 connectors is what we call it in our network. And we actually are happy to have one of our network partners here on the call with us today. So we have Reed from Carnegie Mellon University at the Wilton E. Scott Institute for Innovation. So Reed is here to talk with us also about how he's supporting the startups and how their facility is helping as well. But basically we have this network of connectors. They're helping our teams really accelerate ideas in just months instead of years. So we're really trying to connect them to these experts in the field and also our national labs. So I'm with NREL, which is one of our national labs. And so we're also connecting our startups with national lab staff and national lab facilities, which is very difficult normally to get involved with a national lab. It's normally a lot of contracting, a lot of effort to get involved. And we're trying to make those connections happen a lot more smoothly for our innovators. So we've been through round 1 for Solar Prize. We've given away $3 million in that first round, as well as vouchers to be used at our facilities. And then now we're in rounds 2 and 3 for Solar Prize. So we have many more teams that are competing out there, lots of really exciting ideas, brand new startups that are starting, some people that have been in solar for a while and they're coming up with new ideas. And actually very interesting, there's other people from other industries that are coming that have never played in the solar arena before, but they are making some really big impacts because of this program. So it's very exciting. So it's AmericanMadeChallenges.org if you want to learn more.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. That's a very exciting, also important competition. And well, indeed, it seems a little bit like the energy transition is accelerated now by a number of global developments. So very important work you're doing. And indeed, for startups, often the connecting people to the right person can make wonders. Then, well, I see Reed from Carnegie Mellon. So Reed, as a network partner, why don't you maybe explain just briefly what you're contributing and how you work together with NREL on this competition?
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in this. So just a little bit about myself and the role I play in the Scott Institute at Carnegie Mellon. So I've worked in technology-based economic development and technology transfer in Pittsburgh for about 35 years. So I've worked on the funding side in economic development organizations, and I've worked on the technology transfer side of managing intellectual property in universities and trying to help get that out of the university. So I've sort of gone back and forth over a number of years between economic development approach and technology transfer approach. So I've been working very closely with our Wilton E. Scott Energy Institute at Carnegie Mellon, basically since it was formed. And that's gotten me involved with the American-made solar prize competition. So now my role is expanded beyond mentoring just Carnegie Mellon inventors to working with startups more nationally that are participating in this national program. And the kind of things that we see in the Carnegie Mellon specifically are played out more largely in this arena in the American-made solar prize, because everybody's sort of facing the same kind of problems. It's like, how am I going to get to the next technical milestone? How am I going to get any funding before I have any proof of concept? How am I going to build my team? How am I going to find all the right resources? So the kind of connections that I've built up over the years, and that the American-made solar prize through the connectors and power connectors, these are incredibly valuable resources to bring to bear to these entrepreneurs who are maybe in their first startup and trying to figure out this very difficult path. And for many of them, there's a lot of hardware involved. It's not just software. Investors are skittish. Like, how do you move along on a really difficult technology that can have a big impact? So that's the role that we're trying to play at the Carnegie Mellon and in the Scott Institute, and working with the American-made Solar Prize program.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Are you working only in the US ecosystem, or with investors, or maybe even with startups also internationally?
With regard to the American-made Solar Prize, the focus of that is on trying to create a new generation of manufacturing of solar systems in the United States. But in my role at Carnegie Mellon, I'm connected with investors around the world, primarily from the US, but we still do get investors reach out to us from around the world saying, we hear good things about Carnegie Mellon. What do you have that we might be interested in looking at?
That's good. Yeah, well, probably also today, I think this round and what we intend to do with CleanTech Business Club might be a good opportunity to exchange view on a regular basis, more internationally. And obviously, US is the world leader, has always been in venture capital, but as was said before, I think there's so much interesting technology in Europe, but even increasingly here in the region. And I'm also amazed how Dubai is kind of becoming an Africa hub. So many startups from Africa, you know, out of the 3 main African startup hubs being Nairobi, Lagos, and Joburg, they kind of have increasing links to Dubai, and so many more looking for funding. And particularly on the funding side, I think it would be good to liaise more internationally. Yeah, but let's maybe come to some entrepreneurs as well. I see Rashi here, my colleague from India, the co-chair for India, and also for the storage and smart energy task force. And well, you've set up a very successful battery company with lithium ion. Maybe would you like to introduce yourself just briefly, and how you see the current challenges, and maybe also the needs on mentoring, which is our topic today?
Sure. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started my company's first division into robotics and industrial automation. We primarily also do nuclear robotics, and we serve a lot of industrial automation projects. Along with that, I started energy storage a few years back when I realized that renewables was very attractive, but being intermittent in nature, we needed storage. So we diversified into lithium batteries in specific, and now with all the development and hard work that we have put into this, we have the world's smartest lithium battery with us. And to the startups, basically mentoring is very important, because I feel that startups tend to deviate right from the core focus. It is very attractive for a startup to do everything. For example, like since we are into storage, the startup would be very attracted to do batteries for e-vehicles, maybe do even charging infrastructure, because it has immediate money and cash flows coming in. And then they can even, so they divert from their core focus. You should, as a startup, focus on what is core to you. So mentoring is very important, according to me, for all of them. And we are so thankful that in these times, mentoring is available. When we started businesses back then, in a decade back, nothing was available for us. We were all on our own to do everything by ourselves. So it's a fantastic initiative where even the universities and associations and a club like ours is doing a lot of mentoring for these startups. It's a fantastic platform.
And how is the environment in India? Well, India has, I'm, for example, I'm here also sometimes mentoring, or I'm in different committees for selecting startups for investments, also in Abu Dhabi. And I see actually quite a lot of Indian companies being submitted, which I find exciting on new technologies, new trend, where I have the impression personally that at least in CleanTech, India is really ahead. Can you confirm this?
Yes, India has a new startup mission, in which India is supporting all the startups and has a special directive for women startups. And it is also focusing very much on the clean tech, renewable energy based startups. So what you're saying is absolutely correct. And in the government in the country is focusing by and large to have more entrepreneurship promoted in the country. So startups, definitely startup mission is taking up very well in the country.
Wonderful. And well, India has had already economic challenges last year. So the macroeconomic environment, not even speaking about the recent global turmoil, is kind of challenging. How do you see this impacting now on startups?
Yes, the impact is certainly very, very strong on the startups. Startups are struggling right now to manage their cash flows, to manage their survival at the moment. So the word, the proverb, the survival of the fittest is so true in today's testing times, that the startups have to understand that it is not just focusing on going lean, or because nowadays there's also something which is very attractive, is being a very fancy startup. So at the startup stages, you should not be so fancy. You should be lean. You should try to have only what is the basic requirements, so that you can succeed. You can have the money, the finances ready for the right things at the right time. So startups is definitely facing a very, very difficult time in the country. The government is trying to support in all possible means that the startups should not shut down. There are a lot of financial incentives which the government has just started as a package under the COVID relief fund, and under the SIDBI, which is the Apex Bank for the startups in the country. They are distributing these financial aids, but it's again, there is a lot of selection and a filtering mechanism which is happening, so that to ensure that the funds are not misused. So there is a lot of work and effort being done to keep the startups alive at this point of time. But at the same time, the startups also have to understand that they need to be very wise in taking their decisions, in understanding what is the right thing for their company. And all the venture capitalist backed startups are looking in for a second round of funding for the survival at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. That is very insightful on the Indian subcontinent, and I see India really as emerging here as our neighbor from the UAE, and I'm really impressed, I have to repeat, on the companies which are submitted here to the various organizations. Well, maybe I saw Patricia just nodding on a few of the things you mentioned on your advice on the current situation. Patricia, you are with a very exciting organization based in Silicon Valley, but I think you're based in Germany, and you have probably very good advice on mentoring, advice on how entrepreneurs should behave in the current crisis. I think you have a very good global overview, because you are working globally with your approach to advise different organizations on entire startup ecosystems, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cornelius, for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this panel. Very honored. So, brief introduction. My name is Patricia. I work for an organization called StartUP Genome. We are a data research and advisory company advising mainly the public sector, so advising governments on startup ecosystem development. I actually come from international development myself, worked for the World Economic Forum prior to this, and a couple of years for United Nations. So right now, joining a smaller organization, you could say a startup, is of course very, very interesting, and quite a first for me to be, at the forefront of this crisis as part of a startup. So it is a fact that startups are amongst those most affected by the current health and economic crisis, which makes, you know, targeted advice and targeted help all the more important. My company, StartUP Genome, has recently launched a global survey to 75,000 entrepreneurs all over the world, so across 5 continents. And first results indicate that actually 41% of startups in this world are in the red zone with less than 3 months of funding. And this means that 4 out of 10 startups will die in the next 3 months if nothing changes and if they don't raise capital. And so thank you so much for speaking here, you know, in this panel. There is a lot of things that startups can do in order to increase their runway, in order to maybe ensure they do get the funding that is drying up more and more at the moment. And finally, to tap into government stimulus packages. And yeah, I'd love to give more advice on this later.
Yeah, thank you so much. Indeed, it's a very tough time, and startups are obviously, well, disproportionately affected in this unprecedented situation. So, well, I think we can come a little bit more into detail later, but let's maybe go back to an entrepreneur. So we had batteries. Rashi, we have heard some good advice already in general on mentoring, and we have Jocelyn as a very interesting entrepreneur here as well. So Jocelyn is CEO of a startup called PowerUp, and what PowerUp is providing, what batteries urgently need is smart chargers, you know, to extend life as well. So Jocelyn, how do you see the current situation, and tell us a little bit more about your company as well? And please unmute, because unfortunately we cannot hear you.
It's better like this. Sure. Thank you. So yes, my name is Jocelyn. I'm living in Paris, and part of the team also is living in Chambéry, close to the CEA Ines. And I created my first company 10 years ago in LED lighting. And one of my main customers asked me to make some standalone lights, and I didn't know anything about batteries. So I met Anis in Chambéry, and to understand more about battery, because I had to convince my customers that I could know the lifetime of my battery in a special condition. And in fact, I saw that it was not so easy. And today there is a terrible waste on the battery because we are not using and we are not charging the battery properly. And after working 2 years with the CEA, we saw, I met some of the people, and together we decided to build a PowerUp and to work specifically in a technology to extend the battery life. So that was a big challenge, in fact, because it's something completely new. Because so far you have people making batteries, you have people making charger, but they are not communicating together. And the purpose was first to understand how we could understand the real state of life of the battery, and when we know that, having some smart dynamic charge for the battery. So it's a complex work because we have to work with some different engineers. So chemical engineers to understand how the battery will die during the life, if the battery is affected by the temperature or some other parameters. And as soon as we understand why we have some troubles with the battery, we are able to think about a proper charge. So there is different people from chemistry, from electronics, from computer. So we built a team of 15 people the last year. And now we are working with some key customer in France.
Very exciting. And well, what are the main challenges for you in this current environment, and maybe how is particularly your near to mid-term plan affected?
Yeah, what it's difficult today, it's the fact that we are still at the beginning of the company, and it's a little bit more difficult to find customers able to spend some money for prototypes or for some studies, because the cost today for the company is beginning very tough. But in other way, we see that by extending the battery life, I mean, we can win a lot. So there is a win-win position with our customers. So, I mean, on the last months, people are available to talk, available to share information. And I mean, our activities is still going very good.
That's good to hear. Yeah, well, I think we've all heard from Tony Saber that battery is obviously one of the most exciting fields in this period of disruption in this coming decade we are in. So that's very good. So really exciting, and something I think the market really needs. So this is why I think you're definitely on a good track, exactly at the right time. Well, we have a guest from Italy as well, Alessandro. He's well, a bit in fintech, a bit in crowdfunding. Would like to introduce a little bit yourself. I think we had a very good discussion in Abu Dhabi as well. So you can bring, I think, some really badly needed things to the table.
Thank you, Cornelius. Sure. Yes, just only 2 words about me. I'm Alessandro Brunello. I'm in financial. We work to find new method, new systems to work on company asset. Now is a very important age to change this kind of market, the financial market, because from the old finance, we can move in another paradigm. The market now is ready to accept new paradigms, and there is a growing interest in finance, in my sector, about your sector, about new ways to work on green energy asset, and to create a financial instrument and products. Instrument and products in my country is different, but in United States, for example, there is only financial products. In my country, our regulation see financial instrument and products. So I can speak only about products. And these products are very disruptive for energy company, because it's possible now to tokenize, for example, on blockchain, based on blockchain, create a future, not synthetic one, but very close to the asset. And so I'm actually working with an Italian company to understand if it's possible to tokenize the energy. We can build a bridge, and we can leave the money concept. We can move from energy and token and the future. It's not important now, the money, fiat or crypto, doesn't matter. It's a new way to understand the financial about energy. I think this society is very ready to make a change. We know that every living form or evolves only when the alternative is die. We saw the market. We saw the crypto values, for example, Bitcoin, are close, very, very close with the ETF in this moment. And this very strange, is a very new, I think we are arrive near a new world, but I think it's possible. Change is waiting for us. Now is the moment to see what we are really want to do, because it's so important to, I think, understand what we want to rebuild ourselves, our company, to build to the future. Is, I think we are near for a new era from a green energy company.
Yeah, that's amazing what technology is enabling to do today. Would you like to comment maybe just briefly on your crowdfunding activities?
Yes, now it's very difficult to tell you now at detail this, but I think there is a corporate way. I think the future that could be make a big crowdfunding is an umbrella word. There is a lot of instrument, method, regulation, but values too. I think from the CleanTech club have a big, strong thing is a common DNA about relationships. I think if everybody can build a corporate community focused on financial or create a financial instrument and product, could be very, very disruptive for everybody.
Yeah, how do you see the crowdfunding trend? Because crowdfunding has kind of, well, taken off recently here. There's an equity crowdfunding platform in Dubai called Eureka, and even a debt crowdfunding platform called Beehive. And there has been quite an exciting trend here. And more and more companies successfully raise funds, both equity and debt on crowdfunding. How do you see this in Europe? And I'd love to hear also the US perspective after you on crowdfunding.
Yes, from my observatory in Italy and in other areas in Europe, we see at first that lending crowdfunding work good now, and we arrived at the success of 3 small campaigns, but very, very easy and very, very fast. 100,000 euros, not million, but only 2 days, 3 days to complete. From about equity, I think equity have a big problem inside equity. Nobody speaks about because everybody from they want to be the emitter, no? The proposal. But for it's important to understand that it's very difficult to make an exit from an equity crowdfunding campaign. If you invest in equity, it's difficult to make an exit. And so I think probably a clear, pure equity campaign is not the best for us now. I think we can work on new instruments. I think the best now to answer your question is move toward tokenization at all, or new products. And now we can mix old finance and new finance. I'm sure that this mix can change very, very fast the behavior of the markets about financial products.
I have a question, Alessandro. What about convertible loans? You know, a loan which will be returned, but if the company is successful, the person who gives the loan has a chance to convert it to equity.
Professor Weber, excuse me, but I don't list the start of your period.
Oh, my question was convertible loans, loans which you have an option to convert to equity if you find that the company is successful.
I think is quite easy and became easier during the time. But I think as in a few years ago, from the IPO, from the ICO, company, small company too, can introduce a lot of new money in our caches. I think now a big community could create a new product. I think a new product now. I think we come in a new world, absolutely, and I think we need new answers.
Mm-hmm.
I think CleanTech Business Club could be a very important player to suggest new answers. So we can be the
Creative.
pioneers.
Yeah, creative.
Thank you. Okay.
Cornelius is frozen somehow.
Ah, could be.
He is not alive. Hi, Cornelius.
Yes, could be. Okay. Fine.
Yeah, maybe we continue.
Please, Professor.
Dana, you have not yet been able to start with your statement.
Sorry, I dropped out actually, and I think we have a problem always in Dubai at this time. It's now 8 o'clock in the evening, and everybody's streaming movies.
Yeah,
it's crazy. The internet is getting so slow. So
yes.
sorry about that. Yeah,
You
but
are
I think I perfectly dropped in time to introduce Dana Younger. So Dana is an institution in the renewables world, has had decades of experience, one of the really most competent persons I've met, and well, we've interacted over the years. I've learned a lot from you, Dana. You've been for many years the chief renewable specialist in the IFC, and probably one of the best connected person globally in renewables. So I think now you retired just a few months ago and consult a little bit on interesting topics. So excited to hear your viewpoint, and obviously your background. You've been mainly an investor in projects, both with equity and debt, right?
Correct. Well, thank you, Cornelius, and it's a pleasure to be with everybody today. It was interesting to hear Debbie talk about prizes, because about 20 years ago, we took the model of the US DOE prize that was awarded for efficient refrigerators, and actually it was called the Golden Carrot, I believe, and we used that model. A guy named Chaz Feinstein at the World Bank, who recently retired, and I put together a program called PV Market Transformation Initiative, which was originally dubbed the Green Carrot, and we were going to try to do a prize competition. So it's interesting how, you know, nothing is new, really. I mean, we're just recycling, you know, things that we've worked on before. I've had a long history and involvement with startups and support of financing for companies and ventures. IFC is the private sector lending arm of the World Bank Group. And in that capacity for about 10 years, I was the executive coordinator for the funding coming from the Global Environment Facility. And so we used a lot of that money to support startups. And it's interesting because, again, I know you're working on green hydrogen now, Cornelius. We were working on stationary fuel cell applications and did projects in both India and South Africa, where you had abundance of sources, industrial sources of ammonia, and also worked with some US-based companies that eventually, some survived, some passed out of existence. We also did a lot of work in the solar PV space, starting, as I mentioned, with the PVMTI program, also something called Solar Development Group, Solar Development Foundation, where we learned actually the comment that was made about by Jocelyn, I think, about the or maybe it was Alessandro, about the difficulty of equity investment and the difficulty of exits. We spent almost 2 years putting together a new financing vehicle for solar startups mainly in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And the largest part of the funding mechanism was designed as a private equity fund with a debt sidecar. And what we learned after about 2 years, we also set up the foundation, which had much more relaxed standards for providing grants to companies. And what we learned after about 2 years was that the demands of private equity investors were really inconsistent with the needs and requirements of startups, and they just didn't have the sophistication in terms of understanding financial structures, understanding how to manage the needs of equity investors. And frankly, we wound up converting most of the available capital into low interest long-term loans that were eventually forgivable as grants if the companies didn't succeed. So, you know, and that was all in an emerging market context. I have some experience also in the US context. Debbie is working closely with NREL. I've also spent some time at NREL's Industry Growth Forum, which has become sort of the sine qua non for accessing capital from various sources for startups in the US. I also just want to touch briefly in the intro on that whole issue of financial intermediation and different instruments. So really within IFC, we strove to develop a series of financing options that were applicable to many different players across the ecosystem, from startups. There's a small VC team. We also looked at putting money into, for example, a debt fund, which is managed by Responsibility Investments out of Zurich. It's called the Energy Access Debt Fund. I think Cornelius is nodding his head, so I think he's familiar with that. Lighting Global, which started originally with that same DNA from the GEF, they just issued their latest off-grid solar industry markets report showing that there's still a $1.7 billion market opportunity associated with solar and solar lighting in emerging market countries. So this is still a huge opportunity, but as Cornelius knows from his investments, these are difficult times, and we're going to have to find a way to negotiate through them. We've also put a lot of money, or IFC has put a lot of money into the VC and private equity space, groups like Tata CleanTech Fund in India, Berkeley Energy, Renewable Energy Fund in South Asia, Sing Capital, their CleanTech Fund in China. And also I've worked with a lot of startups, people like Azure Power in India, which is now listed on NASDAQ. We were the first investors in Azure before it had even put its first utility scale project in the ground. And also working with larger investors like Equinor Ventures and others. So I'll stop there, but this is a fascinating time we're going through, obviously unprecedented, and creating many new challenges for the startup space.
Thank you so much, Dana. That's impressive. Actually, I've learned a few new things. We've not talked about startups so much, more about solar projects and other things about Africa, but that's an extremely complete view you've had and the privilege of covering over the years. So I think a few of the topics are quite interesting. So for example, to bridging the gap between what private equity or maybe venture capital investors are actually demanding in terms of, financial instruments, governments, whatever, how the startups are made up. That's probably a very important one. Let's maybe ask around who wants to comment on this, because this is obviously the key for companies, you know, to get on the right path to be fit for future funding rounds. Who would like to comment on this?
I'd have a question actually, since we've been speaking about convertible loans. So in international press, convertible loans were discussed quite heatedly as a government tool to help startups. And, you know, I'm by no means a finance expert, but what I understand is that convertible loans leave governments as investors with all the downside risk, but eliminate the upside risk, right? Because successful companies are just going to rebuy, whereas companies not that successful, everything is going to be transferred into equity, and the government finds itself, you know, as equity shareholder in companies maybe not that solid. So what is your what is the opinion of this panel on this situation?
I personally find the option to offer to potential investors a convertible loan quite interesting. Actually, I'm in a startup where we are just talking about it because, you know, the investor gets the offer of 5 or 6% interest, doesn't have to worry about the exit. And of course, the hope that the startup survives the next 1 or 2 years is pretty reasonable, you know, if the business plan is sound and so on, you know. So the investor can, after 2 years, take the money with good interest and go home. But if in these 2 years it turns out that the company is successful, then the investor has the option to convert the loan into equity, and equity at an evaluation which is more corresponding to the beginning of the period. That means when the loan was being offered, than to the end, you know. So for the investor to offer the convertibility is an upside, you know, to say, okay, of course you have a certain risk that the company goes belly up within these 2 years, but this is a risk which can be managed if you look at the papers, if you look at our cash flow and our burning rate and so on. But if you see that the company is successful and you like to stay with it, convert it to equity at a good, attractive evaluation, you know, so it should make it easier to raise money.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I think it's a widely used instrument also from a company's point of view. You're obviously postponing the valuation discussion. You typically have a discount to the next financing round. So it's a very good instrument. Patricia, I think you referred also to a government as an investor, and Dana mentioned a little bit on this situation in which obviously you know, startups they don't really succeed, and investments, maybe a convertible is converted to long-term equity for with the government being an investor, maybe even to a grant, non-repayable whatsoever. Maybe anybody wants to comment for the government being an investor into a convertible loan?
I guess I could mention something. The reason that we're doing these prizes for the US government is kind of to just, I don't know, just be really innovative with the way that we can give away money. So you mentioned grants, and typically the Department of Energy and other federal agencies give away grants or funding opportunity announcements where people have to apply for these things and, you know, apply for the grant, do a lot of paperwork, get that money that way, and then actually have deliverables that are tied to that. And so with the prize structure that we're managing, it's really kind of flipping that on its head. And so the way that the prizes are working is that rather than trying to apply for a grant and getting money that way, you can actually prove that you've been doing great things. You actually do the work ahead of time, and then you submit that information that what you've done. You show your prototype, you show what you've been doing, who you've been partnering with, how you have grown your business, and then you could possibly win prizes that way. So I just wanted to throw that out there as kind of like this new interesting funding mechanism for startups that isn't a grant and doesn't really have strings attached to it. When we give the prize money to that company, the company can do with that money what they need to do to keep their business going. So it's kind of an exciting new thing, although not very new, because Dana had been thinking about this a long time ago too, apparently.
Yeah, let me chime in there too, Cornelius, if I can. This is a really interesting point about the role of governments, and Debbie, you struck on something very important, which is that governments are often much more comfortable giving money away as grants than they are in dealing with financial instruments like debt or equity investments. And in fact, it took us more than 10 years to convince the donors to the GEF, who are the major, you know, OECD governments of the world, that it made sense for them to look at convertible forms of financing where they actually had an opportunity to potentially get some of their money back and to recycle it and to continue to invest it. Because, you know, many governments are, and it's not a criticism, but they're staffed often by developmental economists and people from the public sector who don't have experience with private sector finance. So it took us quite a while to convince governments that it actually made sense to put money into instruments like private equity funds to provide sort of the lender of last resort kind of structures, where we often had them in a position where they would take the first loss, and that would enable the mobilization of capital, for example, from private banks and investors. So this is a lot larger topic. To get back to the equity discussion, you know, it's often the case that investors and entrepreneurs are quite eager to have equity investors, but you do get into these difficult issues around valuation, and using convertible loans can often be a way, as Cornelia said, to kind of defer some of that difficulty and to, you know, provide bridge financing that can kind of help launch a venture before you know, go down the path of equity. I'll stop there because I think other people also want to chime in.
If I could add a little bit, about some experiences in Pittsburgh. So we have a number of economic development organizations in Pittsburgh that are set up as nonprofits, but they're funded by the state of Pennsylvania. And when they put out early money through their accelerators or sometimes directly into companies, they do it as convertible notes. So it's through an intermediary nonprofit that does the convertible notes. An exception to that is I'm on the investment committee for a fund that the city of Pittsburgh has. They have this organization called the Urban Redevelopment Authority that's been around since the 1940s or something like that. Mostly do very safe kind of financings, debt financing for working capital and real estate and so on. But in the last 10 years or so, they've wanted to be a player in this technology and startup scene. So they started making investments on order $100,000 to $200,000 and doing it through convertible notes. And basically they're following on to the other economic development organizations that have the more professional staff to evaluate the startups. And they have an investment committee that includes investors and entrepreneurs and the economic development organizations. So they're reducing the staffing level in a sense of what they would need to do due diligence on these startup companies, because they're a traditional loan kind of entity. They're looking for collateral, which these startups just don't have. So it's a new mindset for them. So they're sort of piggybacking on what other people are doing, but the actual instrument that they're using is a convertible note. That is basically exactly the same as some of the economic development groups in town.
That's an interesting one. And is your fund investing globally, or what is the investment strategy, just to understand a little bit?
So that one that I mentioned last is specific to the city of Pittsburgh. If you're even across the line into a borough outside the city, you're not eligible. And then the other program I mentioned that is funded by the state, there are 4 of these regional centers that were set up in the 1980s and in association with different research universities. So there's one in Pittsburgh associated with Carnegie Mellon, University of Pittsburgh. There's one in Philadelphia. There's one in the center part of Pennsylvania. There's one in the northeast part of Pennsylvania. But each one of them has funding from the state and has a great deal of autonomy to decide how they're going to invest their money and how they're going to work with their region to promote technology-based economic development.
Okay, and well understood. So it's a municipality, state kind of fund promoting regional innovations, technology, so on and so forth. But yeah, of these kind of funds, I think we need for sure a little bit more in Europe, and particularly here in the region. Just very recently, a startup culture developed, and but what's been happening in Dubai over the last 3 years is quite exciting. And even, you know, a few of the tech startups like Zook.com with Amazon, or Kareem acquired by Uber for I think $3.1 billion, of which half in cash, is quite interesting, and bringing, I think, the region now on the startup map as well. Well, the US is is great and is has always been leading in funding with Silicon Valley. I think many of the startups in Europe, in Asia, everywhere, they're kind of afraid it's just too far. And how do you think can we help in connecting a little bit better the world with what we mentioned at the start as well? So how can we bring these kind of two worlds together, where Europe or other regions that might have really interesting innovations, and the US has a great VC culture and by far the largest market globally for venture capital.
Well, I'm happy to talk a little bit about one element of that, which is the amount of capital that's being mobilized from Silicon Valley for startups in emerging market countries. And a lot of this was started initially by expatriates, for example, expatriated Indians who wanted to see investments made in their home country. So there really is already, I would say to some degree, Cornelius, an international network that kind of springs out of Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley-based firms going global. And also, to a large extent, from people that populate Silicon Valley who see the merit of working in a global economy, or even, picking issues like energy access in Africa as something that they want to spend their energy and talents working on. So I'll just stop there and let maybe other people comment, but I just did want to point out that I think there's already a very significant, interdigitation between Silicon Valley activities and global investment opportunities.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. Let's maybe ask Debbie. You're an amazing connector. I think you must have a great overview on this.
Yeah. So yeah, what the things that we're doing with our new program is really kind of building that network, and it includes investors, of course, across the United States, and also this kind of connector network that I talked about. And that's really all about trying to mentor the teams using accelerators and incubators and prototyping facilities. We also have one of our other connectors is the Nation of Makers, which is really interesting. It's a makerspace community that's across the country. So it's kind of this new paradigm of trying to connect the teams to regional connectors or regional resources that can help them, which of course includes the investors as well. Another element of the prize program is that they get to do demo days where they get to be on stage and showcase their prototypes and their advancements that they've made throughout the prize competitions. And when we do those demo days, we always want to bring in investors to help those teams. And we mentioned that, this is really focused on US manufacturing advancements, but we're always interested in international investors as business partners, right? So the work that's being done, we hope will be done in the United States, but the investors can come from across the globe for sure. So yeah, we're seeing some really neat connections, I think, with this network that we've built. And then that includes, of course, the investor community in general. I will say that our last demo day, there's always the best benefit of being in front of people in person. But because of the current events, we had to do our last demo day virtually, and it worked out great. So we still were able to do a virtual event, sort of like this one, where the teams could still pitch their ideas, still get some one-on-one coaching from our judges and from investors. So we're still kind of moving forward, and the beautiful thing sort of about the structure that we're doing is it can be done virtually. So we still are moving forward no matter what right now.
Yeah, I think
that's great. Yeah, well, let's at least the positive side that this brings us closer and easier together, and maybe we can even somehow participate with our network here, just keeping the time difference in mind. I'm so glad to hear all of this. So I think we can definitely start also liaising more closely. And what we said with Thomas at the start, you know, as a hub of hubs to bring the different organizations, accelerators. Your program, I think, sounds really interesting. We can probably learn a lot. So that's, let me maybe just briefly outline
Cornelius,
what we're doing.
if I can just add one comment, you know, because on the surface you think awarding a prize is a very, how should I say, it only at the end you have one prize winner and then it's one per year or so. But the point is, of course, and I'm sure, Debbie, you do the same, you can create finalists, you know, any company selected to go on stage, even a virtual stage, is already selected out of a larger number of proposals and submissions. And then having these finalists, they still have a much better opportunity to get funding from investors, because investors like this pre-screening, you know, which weeds out completely crazy or unlikely to succeed ideas. So I think from this, with these finalists, one can have a very, very big impact indeed.
Yes, that's a really, really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And along the way, we are giving our finalists dollars, right? So we're giving them, in the first phase, they get $50,000. Second phase, they get $100,000. And then in the last phase, they get $500,000. So even if they don't win the big money, you're right, they get access to, they get visibility, they get access to investors, they get access to DOE facilities. So it's very valuable.
Yeah.
I would like to add something here. Like as Ike and Debbie said, that they get the prize money. In India also, we have seen many of these startup competitions and prizes being delivered by the government and many other forums. But something that is missing is the hand-holding after winning. Because that gives them a high, that gives them a real high of winning, you know, these kind of exciting prize money, and then they tend to deviate from the core focus, as well as they don't know how to utilize that prize money very effectively. So not just winning is important, hand holding and utilizing that amount is very important for a startup, which is today missing. Today, at least we have come to a level where the policies, where such programs are available, which was not there a decade back. Now we need to start implementing how to handhold these startups who have been so talented with technology but are very poor with their management.
But honestly speaking, in order to have a chance on the prize, I think they have to submit what they would do with the prize money. Isn't that right, Debbie?
That is true. Yep, that is true. But you have a very good point, Rashi, that they do, many of them still do need hand holding. The other thing we've seen is that it's sort of a door that opens up to them to get other funding. So get other investors to fund them and help them, or maybe be part of a different DOE program that like small business programs and other things like that, that would allow them to get add-on funding in the future. But you have a very, very good point that some of them are not well-established startups, and they do need a little bit of hand-holding even after they win the big money.
If I could supplement that, Rashi, that's an excellent point. And I would just note that for many years, IFC had a series of what were called business advisory services that they ran in conjunction with essentially a venture fund that was kind of alongside it, so that, you know, if you wanted to access the funds, you know, you also had access to business advisory services. It would help you organize a business plan, understand what investors need to see in order to provide that basic funding. And it's important that to note, for those of you who are interested and maybe dialing in or watching this from emerging market countries, at the World Bank Group, through its InfoDev program, it actually operates a global network of business incubators. And you can look that up online. It's called InfoDev. and also the World Bank's SMAP program, which is the energy sector management program, which receives funding from a lot of governments around the world. They also have had a series of energy incubators that they've set up. I'm not quite sure where that stands at the moment in India, but I know that in the past there were incubators supported by the World Bank in India. So, you know, your point is extremely well taken, Rashi, and I completely agree.
Actually, this raises an idea, Tomasz and Cornelius and Anis, you know, what one could consider in our business club activity in startups is create a global network of potential business mentors. And the people whom I would like to recruit for this would be people who are more or less retired, you know, who have time at their hands, who have already their finances settled. So I would not offer those mentors any compensation. I would offer those mentors the chance to get a tiny piece of the equity if the company is successful. I think with this one could motivate many people to spend time and effort in mentoring. It would be at no cost for the startup. And of course, a startup which gets successful, whether it has given off whatever single-digit percentage of equity or not, doesn't change its position, but it would give the mentor then a real incentive to do a good job.
So can I also comment?
Let's think about it.
Comment on this?
Yeah, yeah.
because
you are just from the hidden place.
No, I just would like to show this slide because you remember this is the structure how we identified the actors around. Yes, yeah. The Startup Hub, and we always have this expert group. Yes, and also other project that we are working on is CleanTech Business Institute. Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe we can connect this expert group. You see with this mentorship, mentorship group. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's a very good idea to offer equity as an incentive, and particularly, yeah. I think, as you say, Eike, for retired executives. I've actually done a lot of mentoring almost all the time for free.
Although you are not yet retired, Cornelius.
Exactly, I need to. But I just wanted to briefly, because it might be of interest for the group, explain what we're doing with Dubai Angel Investors. So we started this fund in 2016. So every individual could buy one stake. One stake is $25,000. And well, we've raised, I think, around $5 million in this context, basically with individuals being typically executives here in the region, venture capitalists. So we have quite a interesting group of investors, the number 2 of Etisalat Group, for example, or Middle East Venture Partners, Dubai Chamber, Vanda. So we have a monthly pitch night, which is an amazing social event, always networking, where we invite startups to pitch, and then it's typically 3 companies. And then we have immediately after investment committee, we invest early stage. So it's kind of seed stage, what we're doing, because we really want to make an impact. We want to help to develop the ecosystem. And then we have a cap of 250,000 for a single investment. We made, I think, 18 investments for now. But more interestingly, for the really exciting companies, we have a team doing a very good due diligence. So then basically the group of individual investors is joining forces and is topping up, sometimes tripling, quadrupling the investment of the fund with single tickets. So with this network together as an investment club, well, we've made really an interesting, let's say, impact now in the region, and we've managed to contribute a little bit to the local startup ecosystem, which is finally developing a little bit. So that's just a view from Dubai. You can check out our website. It's dubaiangelinvestors.me. And with this organization, I would have loved to have one of the 2 co-founders on board, but unfortunately they were not available today. But that's one of the organizations we would love, of course, to reach out internationally, to make more partnerships and learn from each other in different ways,
Very good idea.
One suggestion I'd like to add here is that we've decided on how we want to do the CleanTech startup mentorship and stuff. Also, we need to ensure that each and every country has a different method of investment, a different climate, and a different culture, and a different scheme. So we need to also enlist somewhere these schemes together, so that even if one startup is not very comfortable in its own nation, or maybe the product is not very, or technology is not suitable currently for the country that he or she belongs to, they can always look into some other country where it is more required. Like, for example, in the Clean Energy Access, developing countries require it more than the developed countries. So a startup, even if he is in a European startup, they can actually go and do more business in Africa or India or Bangladesh or maybe any developing nation. So we need to have a list of all these schemes and all the things available with the country specific norms. That would make a startup's life more easier. And at CleanTech Business Club, if we can do that, I think we have nailed it.
Absolutely. Well, it's an extremely important point, Rashi. So the challenge is always this jungle, of finding the right funds, the right programs, and so on and so forth. And I think this could exactly be our role, to be an aggregator, to be a little bit, let's say, a gold mine, a structured gold mine, to help, to serve startups in this respect. So no, I think this point is well taken, and I think with Eike and Thomas and Anish will definitely take this up. Well, we have a few more minutes. I would maybe like everybody to make some final statements, but I think my conclusion from today is I think we have a really exciting group here. I've met some very interesting new people, so we love to, of course, stay connected. Great contributions, I think, from all sides, very complimentary. And let's maybe start with you, Debbie, as the chairman of our panel.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I also met a lot of great new people today, so I'm very excited about this potential of kind of extending what we're doing in the United States to an international audience. And I think that would be really, really great to make continue these connections. So thank you everybody for participating today. And yeah, if anybody wants to know more about the American Made Challenges, I'm happy to talk about that. Or you could learn more as well on americanmadechallenges.org. But really, thank you very much. I think the conversation was really, really, really great today.
Thank you. Reid, would you like to comment?
I just want to put a little plug in for something that Dana mentioned earlier, which is the Industry Growth Forum, which is a very important venture fair in the clean tech industry. And the reason I'm trying to emphasize it again, Dana mentioned it, is it's happening next week and it's virtual. So one of the benefits of the pandemic is that anybody in the world can sort of participate in this very important venture fair without having to travel to the United States or specifically to Denver. So I encourage all of you who are international to check that out. I'll just stop there.
That's a great point. I think we can share also with everybody the link on how to access later on. Thank you for mentioning this. Dana, I see you next to Reid on my screen here.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of closing remarks, I think, this is a very challenging period, and I don't really know what specific advice to offer entrepreneurs other than, to continue doing what you're doing and to look for as many possible funding channels, mentors, and organizations whose prior experience you can benefit from, to try to walk in the shoes of other people in the same field. These are very challenging times. I don't know whether you noted it, Cornelius, but there was a question in the Q&A from somebody asking whether there are accelerators in Dubai. So I don't know whether you want to answer that before we wrap up. Yeah, but in any event, it's been a pleasure to be with all of you today, and happy to talk more to people offline as appropriate.
Good.
Wonderful. Maybe you want to become even more a mentor, Dana. I presume you've done a lot of mentoring already, but you have more time now. So that's maybe a thing. But thank you. Yeah, indeed. I saw this question came in on accelerators. Yeah, there's different accelerators in Dubai. There's the Future Accelerator by the Future Foundation, Emirates Towers. There is Crypto Labs in Abu Dhabi, which is not only on cryptocurrency, it's a global multi-sector accelerator. So this is recent things. So definitely the UAE-based ecosystem for startups is growing and is offering, I think, some reasonable possibilities now to operate. Well, next I see here on the screen, Jocelyn, maybe your closing remarks.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you. It was very interesting. And just for a short story, we won in France the prize CleanTech Open in France last year. And we were invited in America, in Los Angeles. And we pitched against many people from US and other countries. We didn't win in the US, but I mean, it was a great experience. Before you just say that it's good for a company because we can meet some investor and people, and where we went back to France telling that we went to US for the CleanTech Open Prize. I mean, our client was very proud of us and was very, very good. Just to show that we cross the ocean to go to America to try to win a prize. And that was very grateful for the team. So all of these things are very, very good for the startup.
Well done, Rashi.
I just like to say a very simple thing for the startups. Nothing on tech, something on the management and positivity note that there's all the startups right now across the globe are going through a very difficult rough patch. So hang on there with all the positivity that you can grab in right now, and trust me, you will succeed. These are your testing times. And if at this moment as a startup, you can sail through this with all the, unloading all the excess baggage that you have taken in your boat, you will see the sea, you will see the land on the other side of the sea. Trust me, and just hang on there with all the positivity that you can. You will sail through.
Very good words, Eike.
Yeah, I must really compliment you, Rashi. Wonderful words. But, I have a real concrete and fantastic idea. I hope it is fantastic. You see, in the past, it was impossible to even think about a global e-venture fair, because travel costs and all of that would be prohibitive. But when I listen to all of you, to Dana, to Debbie, and so on, all these programs in the past are limited to some regional area where the prize money comes from and so on. So Thomas, what I would suggest is we launch with our CleanTech Business Club a global e-venture fair, where we do exactly, and we use the best experience which we can get from Dana, Debbie, and so on, what has been done regionally, but we do this globally. And the idea should be, even when we turn after coronavirus days back to physical meetings, we keep this as an online event, because an online event creates no costs for the participants. They don't have to go with 3 people to travel to United States or wherever. And we can have the global best startups, and we have the globally most interesting investors. And I could think with this, we could really change our field. Of course, I guess I would suggest to keep it to the CleanTech area. We have to be focused on something, but this area is, of course, big enough. It's not just PV, it is really the whole area. We collect the most innovative ideas. We collect the best brains as mentors. And of course, at the end of the day, making this connection between the most interesting startups worldwide and the most motivated investors worldwide. I guess we can really do something for the community. So this would be a concrete idea coming out of today's meeting.
Very good, Eike. That's I think that's great. And well, we have an amazing network here. We have the different task forces. We have the expertise.
Everything
you know, we
is
have
here.
Amazing experts for different technologies, like yourself on PV and like Rashi on batteries and many more. So
But we will attract many more. No problem, I think, you know.
That's a great task, great idea to follow up. Patricia, maybe also an opportunity to work together with us on this.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, they say every crisis is also always an opportunity.
Yeah.
During the past recession in 2008-9, the Great Recession, there were 50 unicorns created. So you know, maybe we're all up to something big. Nonetheless, I do have a small plug as well. So reading the news, you know, certain countries are now opening up again while others are closing down further. I just read that Singapore has extended the lockdown until 1st of June. And of course, governments or everyone needs to know how startups are doing during this time. So my company, StartUP Genome, launched this global founder survey that I've mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah.
And this is a startup mentoring session. So if you are a startup, no matter where in the world, I would urge you to participate, simply because we do need to know what the situation is to lobby or to work with governments on finding tools or instruments that help. And we just got our first round of results where, as I mentioned at the beginning, 40% of startups are in the red zone, but we'll see how this goes as we see over time. So we would establish a startup tracker tracking how everyone is doing in this uncharted territory. So if you're interested, please do go on our website, startupgenome.com, or reach out to me. I'd be very happy in connecting you and helping you fill out the survey. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patricia. And I think next to you is Anis in this beautiful green place. And well, I think we have a lot to do now on startups.
Hi again.
Anis, what is your view? How do you see today's discussion?
Yeah, I would say I will make a little bit the link with the previous discussion that I was chairing and having Thomas as a moderator. It's that people admit that having the three words together, innovation and technology, gathered with industry and with investor, and now we'll add on the top of that mentors, all together in the same place, which is called CleanTech Business Club. It's really a good idea. Physically, as Ines will be hosting this startup hub, getting the idea of coming from Eike or Patricia, it's really, really wonderful to, there is a lot of perspective, how putting those three words together, there will be a lot of things that really at the CleanTech Business Club members can play with it. I was listening to Debbie carefully, and at CEA, it's a big company, and we have a strong background that we initiated from startup company. Now it's a big enterprise on microelectronics, like ST Micro and Soitec, and we are pushing to initiate something on energy, and we have quite same system, Debbie, which is giving some fund, securing the salary of the people, helping them, giving them access to our platform. One of the idea, which was really simple, that we find out that when we are coming from technology and pointing that those people as a CEO was not a good idea, because they don't have this in their DNA. They were more a CTO, not more. And we were a little bit having some opening for this. We have Jocelyn around us, who has an experience, how to talk to investor, how to initiate company. I think our strength is in the mix, taking the best of each. And there is a lot to do, and I will be keen. There is a lot of people around the table, and I was learning a lot, and thank you very much for this nice session.
Wonderful. Well, that's a great summary and statement. Anis, thank you so much for this. Well, Thomas, you're the host, so I leave probably the last few words to you, and maybe also going forward on hopefully our homework we will work on jointly soon.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much, Cornelius, for amazing job. I know when I give you some job, it's always perfect, yes? And I would like to just refer to our discussion with Charlie 5 years ago when we were working on other project. And Charlie was showing me this map with different dots, yes, on Earth, and how we are connecting these dots. And actually, we arrived to the point when all these dots are connected, yes? And I believe that, you see, with this pandemic, we also discovered the new ways of connections. Yes? So practically, before, we were meeting face to face, and we are able so great to connect, yes, through edge to edge, human to human. And now, even we are so blocked at our homes, actually, we are even able to better connect, yes, because we don't need to travel, yes. And I feel that, especially in this disruptive, difficult situation, it's so important that we unite forces. And I noticed that through this whole eConvention and through these discussions with the startups, that we reached the most important goal, that we connected the dots. And I like very much always to have discussions, yes, because discussions can bring you a lot of ideas. But especially like you people from the startups, you know that discussions are good, but the most important is action, yes? And if you have the best discussions, but without action, so then your dream remains dream. So I believe that we should take action. I liked so much the idea of ICA. I think we can work on that. I also liked the idea of mentorship, and I think that that Charlie invited Dana not by accident, but maybe he had also this one in thinking. And I would be honored if you would like to all work with us on the action. So this would be like I would say my outtake. Yes. So if you would like to work, no, first let's do like this. Let's be concrete. Do you agree to work with us on concrete things? Who is for that? Thumbs up. Dana, are you okay also? Okay. So this is our flagship sign, and I'm very happy about this call. And please, we will after this event we will send you the concrete proposals in the 3 bullet points. Yes, 3 actions that we would like to make together, and then let's start from this. Yes, and if you have afterwards any other ideas to follow up, please always contact me. Contact Cornelius, Aika. We will create like one, let's say, startup leadership list, maybe like 20-30 people, just not to spam you with a lot of emails. And then maybe within 2 weeks we will organize a separate call. Are you okay with this?
Very good.
Good. Sounds good.
Okay.
Super.
So thank you so much once again, and enjoy your time. Yes, at home.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Stay
so
safe.
much.
Thank you, and stay safe,
Evening.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Davey,
Enjoy
so much.
your garden, Anis. You have a
Thank
nice
you, Dana.
garden.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Aiki.
Aika, you have very nice, Anis, you have very nice background. Where did you buy it?
That is real. That's not artificial.
But actually, let's stay here because we are staying now here. Our team. If you want, you can also. We can also
continue. Okay, good.
We're still on YouTube Live.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to remove the live, and then we are done.
So,
Good.